He was mopping the floor when she handed him the microphone as a joke. 60 seconds later, every scientist in the room had gone completely silent. This is the story of Logan Hayes, a man the world forgot, a daughter who never stopped believing in him, and a CEO who made the biggest mistake of her career the moment she decided to laugh. Stay with me until the very end. If this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. The Meridian Grand Convention Center had seen a lot of important evenings in its 40-year history. Political fundraisers where senators shook hands too long and smiled too hard. Charity galas where the champagne cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. Corporate launches where men in Italian suits described products that would disrupt everything and then quietly disappeared from the market 8 months later. But the Apex Innovation Summit was different. At least that was what the promotional materials said. And for once, the promotional materials were probably right. The summit occupied all 4 floors of the Meridian Grand for 3 full days every October, pulling in the kind of crowd that didn't need name tags because everyone already knew everyone. Chief technology officers, venture capital partners, Department of Defense contractors, university department heads with federal grants and tenure, and the particular kind of confidence that comes from never being wrong in any room where it counts. This year's headline attraction was something they were calling the Prometheus Challenge, $50 million. That was the prize. Not a grant, not a fellowship, not a pathway to potential funding pending review. $50 million, cash, to anyone who could crack what had become known quietly in the research community as the alignment cascade problem, a theoretical and computational bottleneck in next-generation artificial intelligence architecture that had stymied every serious lab in the country for the better part of 3 years. The problem was elegant in the way that the most brutal problems always are. It looked solvable. It almost looked simple, at first glance, a matter of recursive optimization across adaptive neural frameworks, the kind of thing you'd expect a competent postdoc to knock out over a long weekend. But the deeper you went, the worse it got. Every solution created 3 new problems. Every workaround introduced instability at a different layer. It was the computational equivalent of trying to catch smoke with your hands. 7 research teams, 11 independent labs, 2 national supercomputing facilities. Nobody had gotten close. Madison Reed had put up the $50 million herself. She was standing at the back of the main hall at 6:47 in the morning, 43 minutes before the doors officially opened, with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched yet going cold in her hand. 30 years old. CEO of Arcturus AI, which had gone from seed round to a $4.3 billion valuation in less than 5 years. She'd been on the cover of 3 magazines in the last 18 months, featured in the kind of profiles where the writer spends 3 paragraphs describing how the subject walks into a room. Madison Reed did walk into rooms a certain way. She knew that. It wasn't arrogance exactly, or it wasn't only arrogance. It was a posture she'd built on purpose, one careful choice at a time, starting from a childhood in a small apartment in Cincinnati where ambition was the only currency she had. She was dressed already, charcoal blazer, white shirt with the collar open exactly 1 button, dark slacks, shoes that were expensive but not flashy. Her dark hair was pulled back. She looked like what she was, someone about to run a very long, very important day. "Catering confirmed?" she said, without turning around. "Yes." Her assistant, Priya, checked something on her tablet. "All 5 sponsors have confirmed their table arrangements. The live stream team did a full technical run at midnight. You've got a 9 o'clock sound check with the AV crew, then your first panel at 10:30. And the competing teams? Checked in. Dr. Cho's group from MIT, the Stanford Consortium, Dr. Voronov's team from Nexus Labs." Priya scrolled. "Dr. Paulson's independent group flew in from Berlin last night. All 4 teams have been briefed on the challenge parameters." Madison nodded slowly. "Good." She looked out at the hall. Round tables with white linen, stage at the far end, projection screens on 3 walls, the Arcturus AI logo in clean silver letters along the back panel, chairs stacked along the walls, waiting to be arranged. It was the quiet before something large and loud, and she'd always found these early morning hours before events oddly clarifying, like the world was still simple. And the venue staff? Catering crew is in the kitchen. Grounds and housekeeping came in at 5. Priya glanced up. Logan Hayes is the lead on housekeeping for the East Wing. He's already here if you need anything escalated to facilities. Madison didn't register the name. There was no reason she would have. The name floated past her the way most logistical details did. Noted, processed, filed somewhere near the bottom of the priority stack. Tell them to keep the East Corridor clear before 10. Media needs that whole section. Already communicated. Madison finally took a sip of her cold coffee, made a face, and handed the cup back to Priya. Let's go over the keynote one more time. Logan Hayes had been at the Meridian Grand since 4:55 in the morning. That was normal for him. He tried to beat the morning traffic because the highway interchange near his apartment in Eastside Garfield ran badly after 6, and he didn't like cutting it close. He'd already cleaned 2 full corridors of the East Wing, restocked 3 supply carts, handled a spill in the service elevator that nobody had bothered to report, and fixed a ceiling tile in the pre-function space that had been sagging for 2 weeks despite 2 maintenance requests. He worked the way he did most things, methodically, without a lot of noise. He was 32 years old and looked it, maybe a year or 2 more. There were circles under his eyes that had been there for a while, put there by years of early starts and late ends, and the particular kind of fatigue that doesn't come from work alone. He was lean in a way that wasn't intentional, the kind of lean that happens when you forget to eat because you're busy. His hands were the hands of someone who used them every day. He pushed his cart down the East Corridor past the main hall and paused near one of the event display boards, a large printed schematic of the summit's program, mounted on foam board near the entrance. He looked at it for a moment. Read the title of the headline challenge. Read the problem description summary printed below it in smaller type. He read it twice. Then he pushed his cart on. At 8:30, he was working near the back of the main hall when one of the younger event staff, a kid named Marcus, maybe 22, still working on the confidence that comes with the uniform, came over looking flustered. Hayes, you see anything weird near the service entrance on the west side? Something triggered the motion sensor at like 4 in the morning and nobody went to check it. Probably a rat, Logan said. He pulled a fresh microfiber cloth from his cart. There's a gap in the weather seal on the west service door. It's been there for months. Anything small can trip the sensor. Report it to facilities, ask them to replace the seal, and disable the sensor on that door until they do. Marcus stared at him for a second. How do you know all that? Because I checked it 6 weeks ago when the same sensor triggered. Also put it in the maintenance log, which nobody apparently read. Marcus nodded, awkward. Right. Thanks. He left. Logan kept working. The doors opened at 9. By 10, the hall was full. The energy in those rooms was always something Logan noticed, not because it excited him, but because it was part of the job. Crowd behavior affected cleaning patterns, traffic flow, where the spills happened, which corners people tended to gather in. Over 3 years working event venues, he'd gotten good at reading a room's energy purely from a facilities standpoint. This room was charged. You could feel it the way you feel a low hum from electrical equipment, not loud, but constant. These were people who believed they were at the center of something that mattered, and there's a particular kind of restlessness that comes with that. He was refilling a paper towel dispenser in the corridor just outside the main hall entrance at 10:47 when the first panel got loud. Not argument loud, excited loud. Something had gotten a reaction. He didn't look up from what he was doing. The panel was called Breaking the Ceiling, where current AI architecture fails and why. 4 panelists, 1 moderator, a couple hundred people in the audience. Standard tech summit format. Madison Reed was not on this panel. She didn't do panels. She did keynotes, and she had 1 scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. But she was standing at the side of the room with a water glass, watching, because this was her summit, and she liked to watch things run. The panelist who was talking right now, Dr. Gregory Paulson, 50s, silver hair, visiting from his lab in Berlin, author of the most cited AI alignment paper of the past decade, was in the middle of making a point about recursive stability that was losing about a third of the room. Not because he was wrong, because he was dense and he knew it, and he didn't particularly care. The core issue, Paulson was saying, is that we've been framing this as an optimization problem when it's actually a constraint satisfaction problem with dynamic parameters. The moment the parameters shift, and in any real-world deployment, they will shift, your optimization breaks down. This is why every current approach fails at scale. So what's the fix? Someone in the audience called out. Paulson adjusted his glasses. There isn't one. Not with the current theoretical framework. That's what I'm trying to say. You need to rebuild the framework from the ground up, which is why the 50 million is going to be sitting in a vault for a while longer. Some laughter. Some uncomfortable shifting. Logan had finished with the paper towel dispensers. He was running his cart past the main hall entrance when he slowed. Not because of the panel, not exactly, because of what Paulson had just said. He stood there for a moment, one hand on the cart, head slightly angled toward the open doors. His expression didn't change. He was just listening. You disagree with that assessment? The moderator had noticed someone in the audience raising a hand, a man near the back, a university type, you could tell by the jacket, and was nodding at him. Only partially, the man said, standing. I think the constraint satisfaction framing is right, but I'm not sure the framework needs to be completely scrapped. There's work from, I think it was around 2019 to 2020, some early papers on adaptive constraint hierarchies. If you could stabilize the priority weighting across iterations, you might not need to rebuild from scratch. I remember that work, Paulson said, with the tone of someone about to be kind but correct. It was promising, but it didn't resolve the cascade problem. The author abandoned that line of research fairly quickly. The author, the man from the audience said, never published a reason why. A pause. No, Paulson said. They didn't. Logan pushed his cart on. He had a spill to deal with near the coffee station at the far end of the corridor, and after that a bathroom check in the east wing, and he was supposed to meet Marcus at 11:30 to go over afternoon assignments. He didn't think about the conversation he'd half heard, or he tried not to. By 1:30, the summit was in full swing, and the main hall was packed for a pre-keynote presentation by the director of the National AI Research Consortium, a woman named Dr. Beverly Choi, who had the rare gift of making complicated things clear without making them stupid. Madison was watching from the wings again. Priya was beside her, murmuring updates. Live stream is at 42,000 concurrent viewers, Priya said, up from 30 at noon. Good. Madison watched Choi gesture at a slide on the screen behind her. A cascade diagram, failure points marked in red. Have we confirmed the Prometheus panel lineup for 4 o'clock? Yes, Dr. Cho, Dr. Voronov, Dr. Paulson, and Dr. Reyes from Stanford. Moderator is Fielding from Tech Chronicle. And the challenge board. Displayed on the main stage screen. Problem statement, parameters, scoring criteria. Madison nodded. She was watching Choi now, but her mind was running ahead to the afternoon. The Prometheus panel was the centerpiece of the whole summit, the thing she'd spent 7 months building toward. $50 million and the strongest collection of minds in the field on a live broadcast, working on a problem that had beaten everyone. Win or lose, it was going to make noise. She liked making noise. It was 2:15 when things went sideways for the first time. Not in a dramatic way. Not yet. Logan was in the main hall clearing cups from the back tables during a short break between presentations. The room was about half full, people standing in clusters. The usual conference behavior, networking in the tonal range between genuine interest and professional obligation. He was moving quietly along the back wall when he passed the stage display. The Prometheus challenge parameters were still projected on the big screen, the same summary block he'd read off the foam board that morning, but now expanded to full specifications. All the equations, all the constraint parameters, the 3-part problem structure laid out in clean mathematical notation. He slowed. He stopped. Not for long. Maybe 90 seconds. He stood with a bus tub in one hand, looking at the equations on the screen. Then he moved on. Good kid. He almost made it out of the room. He would think about that later. How close he came to just pushing through the side door and letting the day keep moving. How different things might have been. He was 3 feet from the exit when Madison Reed's voice cut across the room. "Hey, you!" He stopped. She was standing near the center aisle, and she was looking at him. She'd been watching him slow near the display screen, and something about it, a janitor stopping to study equations, had caught her attention the way an absurdity catches your eye. Not with cruelty, not yet. Just the particular amusement of something that doesn't fit. "You looking at the challenge?" she said. Around them, the clusters of people were beginning to notice. The room was quieting slightly, the way rooms do when they sense an edge. Logan turned to face her. "Sorry, I was just walking through." "No, you stopped." Madison's voice was easy, performative. She knew people were listening. "You were looking at it, so what do you think?" The room had gone quiet enough now that it was a scene. People had turned. There was that thing that happens in crowds where the group decides something interesting is happening and collectively pays attention. "I think," Logan said, "it's a complicated problem." A few people smiled. A few people laughed. "Is that so?" Madison took a step toward him. She wasn't being vicious, not yet, but she was giving the room what it seemed to want. A moment, a contrast. The billion-dollar CEO and the janitor with the bus tub. "Well, we've got 4 teams of world-class scientists working on it for a $50 million prize. Since you seem to have an opinion, maybe you'd like to give it a shot." Laughter, louder this time. Logan didn't react to the laughter. He just looked at her with the same level expression he'd had since she called out to him. The kind of expression that's hard to read because it isn't performing anything. "I'm on the clock," he said. "I've got tables to clear." "Oh, come on." Someone in the crowd, she didn't see who, called it out, half teasing, half genuine. The crowd had decided this was fun. Madison smiled. She gestured at the stage. 5 minutes. Humor us." Logan looked at her for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes, some private calculation. Then he looked at the screen, then back at her. "You sure you want that?" he said quietly. She didn't hear the seriousness of it. She was already playing to the audience. "I'm sure," she said. "Go right ahead." He set the bus tub on the nearest table. He walked to the stage. It was a distance of maybe 30 feet, and in those 30 feet the room changed. It's hard to explain how exactly. Nothing visible happened, but the quality of attention shifted. The laughter hadn't stopped exactly, but it had gone a register quieter, a register more uncertain. Maybe it was the way he walked, like someone who wasn't performing, like someone who'd done this kind of thing before, in a different room, a long time ago. He stepped up onto the stage. He stood in front of the projection screen, looked up at the equations for a moment, and was quiet. The silence stretched. 40 seconds. 45. Someone in the crowd murmured something. Someone else shushed them. Then Logan said, "The problem statement has a structural error in the third parameter cluster." Silence. "The constraint weighting equation. This one here." He reached up and pointed, without a pointer, just his finger, to a specific line in the cascade diagram. "This is written as a fixed coefficient function, but the variable it's weighting isn't stable across iterations. It fluctuates based on the recursive layer depth. So any solution that treats this coefficient as fixed is going to fail at scale because it's solving for a constraint that isn't actually constant. It's solving for a ghost." The silence was different now. It had a different texture. "That's why every team fails," Logan said. "Not because the problem is unsolvable. Because the problem as written contains an assumption that makes it unsolvable. If you replace the fixed coefficient with a dynamic weighting function, and there's a class of functions that handles this kind of parameter, they were explored in some early work around 2019, but never fully developed, then the cascade problem resolves. Not elegantly, not immediately, but it resolves." He stopped. He looked out at the room. 300 people were looking back at him. Dr. Paulson, who had been standing near the stage for the last hour, was standing very still. Madison Reed was standing very still. Logan stepped off the stage, walked back to the table, picked up the bus tub, and headed for the service corridor. Nobody said anything for 5 full seconds. Then Dr. Paulson said very quietly, "He's right." The room exploded. Madison caught him in the corridor. She came through the side door fast, and she wasn't performing anymore. The audience energy was behind her, muffled by the door, but she could still feel it. "Wait," she said. Logan stopped. He turned around. He was holding the bus tub. He looked tired, in the specific way of someone who's been up since 5 and has a lot of afternoon left. "What was that?" she said. "I noticed an error in the problem statement," he said. "That's all. That's all." She repeated it flatly with the tone of someone who doesn't find the understatement charming. "You just told a room full of AI scientists, including Gregory Paulson, that they've been working on a broken version of the problem for 3 years. I told them there was a structural flaw," he said. "Whether they've been working on the broken version or not, I don't know. Maybe some of them found it and didn't say anything. Maybe they were working on the correct version and I just didn't see their work." "Were you?" He looked at her. "Was I what?" "Were you working on a correct version?" Something shifted in his expression, closed slightly. "That was a long time ago," he said. "I need a name," she said, "and I need you to come back in there." "I'm on the clock until 6, he said. "Talk to my supervisor." He went through the service door. His name was Logan Hayes, and that was all she had for 40 minutes. Priya ran it. Nothing. Public records, an address in Eastside Garfield, a work history at 2 other event venue companies in the past 4 years, a staffing agency placement record that went back to when the daughter was born. Or when she was about 2, actually, close enough. And then a clean gap before that. No publications, no academic records visible on any public database, no digital footprint that a person would have if they'd been in research, which was the wrong result. The wrong result so consistently that it became its own answer. "Someone scrubbed it," Madison said. Priya looked up from her tablet. That would be a significant undertaking. Or a targeted one. Madison was pacing. The keynote was in 20 minutes. She needed to get her head into the right place for the keynote. She couldn't do that. Or he deleted it himself, or he published under a different name. "I can push to a deeper search. Do it." Madison stopped pacing. "And pull up every AI alignment paper from 2018 to 2021. Anything on adaptive constraint hierarchies or dynamic parameter weighting. Anything that cites those terms." Priya was already typing. "That's going to take time." "I've got 48 hours of summit left," Madison said. "Start what?" She gave the keynote at 2. It was good. She was a good speaker. She had real skill for it. The kind that comes from having said the wrong thing badly for years until you figure out how to say the right thing well. She talked about the Prometheus challenge, about what it meant to the field, about the kind of breakthrough they were hunting for. She was talking to 400 people in the room and 40-something thousand watching live. She didn't mention what had happened in the main hall, but half the room knew. You could feel it in the quality of attention, the particular alertness of people who've seen something they can't quite categorize yet. Logan finished his shift at 6:03. He changed out of his uniform in the locker room in the basement, put on the plain gray hoodie he'd come in with, and checked his phone. One text from his daughter, Nora. "Dad, did you eat lunch?" He smiled a little. He texted back, "Yes, did you do your homework?" Her reply came in under 30 seconds. Most of it. "What's the part you didn't do?" "The math." He put the phone in his pocket and headed for the exit. He almost made it. What? Madison Reed was standing in the service corridor. She was not in the way he would have expected her to stand. Composed, executive, performing presence. She was standing the way someone stands when they've been waiting anxious and trying not to show it, one hand holding a folder, the other at her side. "I need 10 minutes, she said. Logan looked at her, then at the door behind her, which was the exit, then at her again. "I've got to get home," he said. "My daughter gets out of after school at 7. 10 minutes, she said. "I'll make it worth your time." "I'm not looking for it to be worth my time." "Logan." She said his name. It was the first time she'd used it, and he registered it, registered that she'd gotten it, which meant she'd gone looking. "I found a paper, published under L.J. Hayes Cornell affiliation, submitted 2019, Adaptive Constraint Hierarchies and Recursive Neural Optimization. It got pulled from the archive 7 months after it was submitted." She held up the folder. "I have the submission record." The corridor was quiet. Logan was quiet. "I know that's you," she said, "and I know you know things about this problem that nobody in that room comes close to. So I'm asking you, not as the CEO of a company, not as the person who was stupid enough to make a joke at your expense 2 hours ago, just as someone who gives a damn about this field. What happened to that research?" Logan looked at the folder in her hand for a long moment. "Why did you pull it down?" she said. "I didn't," he said. And the way he said it, flat, certain, with the weight of something specific and old, made her go very still. "Then who did?" she said. He looked at her for a moment, and for the first time since she'd called out to him in the main hall, his expression shifted into something more complicated, something less guarded. "I don't know," he said. "I just know it wasn't me." He took the folder from her hand gently, looked at the submission record inside and the date on it. His daughter had been born 6 weeks after that date. His wife had died 2 days after that. He handed the folder back. "I have to go," he said. This time, she let him. He drove home in his 8-year-old Civic with the driver's window that didn't quite seal all the way anymore and the heater that took 10 minutes to warm up. He picked up Nora from the after-school program at the community center. She came out with a project under one arm and a red marker streak on her left forearm that she said was not her fault. "Was it someone else's fault?" he said. "It was Mrs. Kim's fault for leaving markers on the table," Nora said, buckling her seatbelt with the focus of someone who takes seatbelt buckling seriously. "That's creative," he said. "Thank you." He looked at her in the rearview mirror as he pulled out of the parking lot. 8 years old, with his same eyes and her mother's mouth and a way of talking that was entirely her own. "How was your day?" she said. "Weird," he said honestly. She considered this. Good weird or bad weird? He thought about the equations on the screen, about the silence in that room after he'd stepped off the stage, about Madison Reed in the corridor with a folder that contained the record of something he'd buried years ago, or thought he'd buried, or thought had been buried for him. "I'm not sure yet," he said. Nora accepted this as a complete answer, which was one of the things he loved about her. She turned to look out the window. "I almost finished my science fair project," she said. "I just need the data part." "What data?" "The thing about how plants grow faster with music. I need a control group." She paused. "What's a control group again?" "The plants that don't get music," he said. "So you can compare." "Oh, yeah." She nodded slowly, processing. "That makes sense. You're smart, Dad." He didn't say anything. He drove them home through the evening traffic, past the long stretch of low buildings and gas stations, and the park where Nora had learned to ride a bike, and he let himself think for just a moment about a paper that had disappeared from a public archive in 2019, and about a woman with a folder who had found the ghost of it. Somewhere in the Meridian Grand Convention Center, 3.5 miles away, the summit's evening reception was underway. 42,000 people had watched a live stream today, and somewhere in the edge of that number, something that had been buried was beginning to surface. He didn't know that yet. He pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building, and Nora was already unbuckled before he cut the engine, project tucked under her arm, marker streak still on her forearm. "I'll make dinner," he said. "Can we have pasta? We always have pasta." "Because pasta is correct," she said very seriously. He got out of the car. The evening was cold and clear, and the stars were out over Eastside Garfield the way they rarely were. And Logan Hayes stood in the parking lot for a moment with his keys in his hand, looking up at them, thinking about things he'd put away a long time ago. Then he followed his daughter inside. The paper had been submitted on a Tuesday. Priya found that detail at 11:17 that night, sitting in the hotel suite they'd converted into a temporary operations room, surrounded by printed documents and 3 open laptops. The submission timestamp was 11:43 p.m., which meant whoever filed it had been working late, the way people work when they're racing something. A deadline, a thought that might dissolve by morning, or both. L.J. Hayes, Priya said, Cornell AI Research Lab, affiliated researcher status. Not faculty. Not a PhD candidate on record, which is weird, because the paper is PhD level work. Better than PhD level, actually. She looked up at Madison. It was accepted for publication in the Journal of Computational Intelligence. Peer-reviewed, passed first round, passed second round. Then 7 months after submission, it was withdrawn. Reason listed in the archive record is just... She turned the laptop around. Author request. Madison stared at the screen. Author request. That's all it says. And the Cornell affiliation? No record of a Logan Hayes ever being enrolled or employed at Cornell. Priya said it carefully, the way you say things when you're not sure what they mean. The affiliation was listed on the submission form. Whether it was accurate or whether someone just put it there. Someone put it there, Madison said. Or someone removed the record of it being accurate. She stood up and walked to the window. The city outside was doing what cities do at midnight, running on reduced power, the kind of life that moves in the dark. Pull the citations, everything that paper cites and everything that cites it. It doesn't have any citations, Priya said. Nobody cited it. It was in the archive for 7 months before it was withdrawn. In the AI research community, 7 months is nothing. Half the people who might have read it wouldn't have found it yet. So it just disappeared, without a trace. Plus Madison turned from the window. Except that someone built on it anyway. Priya was quiet for a moment, then slowly, what do you mean? Paulson's paper, the one that got him the citation record, the one that everyone in the field calls the foundation of modern alignment theory. Madison moved back to the table and opened the printed copy of Paulson's 2021 paper she'd had Priya pull an hour ago. She turned to page 14 and tapped a specific equation. This formulation, where did he get this? Priya leaned over and looked at it. Then she pulled up the archived Hayes paper on the laptop screen and scrolled to the methodology section. The two equations sat side by side on a screen and a printed page in a hotel suite at midnight. They were not identical. They were close in the way that a translation is close to an original. The same structure, the same underlying logic, different notation, different variable names, different enough to survive a surface comparison. Oh, Priya said quietly. Yeah, Madison said. So, she didn't sleep much. That wasn't unusual for her. She'd run on 5 or 6 hours for most of her adult life, treating sleep as a logistical constraint rather than something she needed. But that night the sleeplessness had a different quality. It was restless in a way that felt moral, which was not a sensation she was used to. She kept coming back to the corridor, to the way Logan had looked at the submission record, the date on it, and the thing that had crossed his face when he saw the date. Not surprise, not pain exactly. Something more like recognition, like seeing a landmark in a city you left a long time ago. She pulled up what she could find on Logan Hayes personally, which wasn't much. There were records of a marriage, Emma Hayes, née Caldwell, and a death certificate dated about 8 years ago, a month after a birth certificate for Nora Claire Hayes. The death record listed the cause as a postpartum complication, the kind of thing that shouldn't happen anymore and still does, quietly and without warning. She stared at the dates. The paper had been submitted 2 days before Emma Hayes died. She closed the laptop. The second day of the summit started at 8. Logan was there at 4:55 again. He had the same cart, the same route, the same methodical quiet. But something was different that morning, and it wasn't in him. It was in the building around him. He could feel it the way you feel weather changing before the rain actually comes. People were talking about yesterday. Not loudly, not in the corridors where he was working, but in the pockets of conversation he passed. At the coffee station, near the registration desk, in the cluster of tech journalists who were always there by 7:30, laptops open, the particular alert posture of people who found something to chase, the name kept surfacing. His name. He heard it twice before 8 o'clock, both times at a distance, both times in a context he couldn't fully hear. He didn't stop to listen. He kept moving. At 8:40, Marcus found him in the East Wing. "Hey," Marcus said, in the tone of someone who has information and isn't sure how to deliver it. "So, I don't know if you saw, but there's like something going on with you online." Logan looked at him. "What do you mean?" "Someone in the audience yesterday had it on video. The thing where you went up to the stage." Marcus held out his phone, slightly awkward, like he was handing over evidence at a crime scene. It's got like 300,000 views. Logan looked at the phone. It was a vertical video, shot from somewhere in the middle of the audience. The angle was bad and the audio was compressed, but you could see him clearly enough. The uniform, the bus tub on the table, the walk to the stage, the moment he pointed at the equation on the screen, and then the silence. And then Paulson's voice, distant and tinny through the phone speaker. He's right. The comments were what they were, some people calling it staged, some calling it the most interesting thing they'd seen all week, some digging for who he was. Logan handed the phone back. "Okay," he said. "Okay," Marcus repeated. That's a lot of views, man." "I still have work to do," Logan said. Marcus stared at him for a second. Then he put his phone away. "You're a strange dude, Hayes," he said, not unkindly. "I know," Logan said, and pushed his card on. The thing about attention, real attention, the kind that scales, is that it doesn't ask permission. It finds what it's looking for, and it pulls. By 9:30, 2 tech journalists had asked the summit's media liaison if there was a Logan Hayes registered as an attendee or speaker. The answer was no, which made them more interested, not less. By 10:15, someone had matched the name to the Cornell archive record of the withdrawn paper, and that connection, janitor at a billion-dollar tech summit, author of a disappeared AI research paper, was the kind of thing that writes itself. At 10:47, a reporter from a major tech publication named Daniel Cho published a short piece with the headline, "Who is the janitor who stumped the summit?" The piece was careful. It didn't claim anything it couldn't support. It noted the video, the response from Paulson, the archived submission under L.J. Hayes, the withdrawn status. It asked more questions than it answered. It got 140,000 reads in 4 hours. Madison found out at 11 when Priya handed her a phone with the article already open. She read it standing in the hallway outside the main hall, where the morning session was running on schedule without her. She read it twice. "Comments?" she said. "Social media is split," Priya said. "Some people think it's a PR stunt you set up. Some people are angry that a researcher of that level is working as a janitor. Some people are going after the paper withdrawal and asking about Paulson." She paused. "It's moving fast." "What's Paulson saying?" "Nothing yet. His team has gone quiet." Madison handed the phone back. She stood there for a moment with her arms crossed, thinking. She had not planted the video. She had not staged anything. That was real, and the realness of it had a kind of momentum she couldn't control, which was not a feeling she enjoyed. But underneath the PR problem, underneath the optics and the narrative spiral, there was something more specific bothering her. The paper withdrawal. The Cornell affiliation with no institutional record. Paulson's paper with that equation on page 14. And Logan Hayes, who had said "I didn't" with the certainty of someone who'd carried that specific weight for years. "I need to talk to Gregory Paulson," she said. "He's in the speaker lounge," Priya said. "He's got a panel at 1. "Before the panel," Madison said, and started moving. Tequo. The speaker lounge was a converted conference room on the 2nd floor. Decent coffee, uncomfortable chairs, the particular awkward energy of accomplished people waiting. Paulson was at a table in the corner with 2 of his colleagues, a half-eaten pastry and a stack of notes in front of him. He looked up when Madison came in. His expression did something complicated, polite, wary, the expression of someone who knows a conversation is coming that they'd rather not have. "Dr. Paulson," she said, "do you have a few minutes?" His colleagues took the social cue and found somewhere else to be. Madison sat down across from him. She didn't have any paperwork with her. She didn't need it. "The paper you published in 2021, she said. "The stability framework. The equation in the methodology section on page 14. Paulson looked at her steadily. "What about it? Where did it come from?" A pause. Small, but there. "It came from my research," he said. "The notation in your paper is different from a withdrawn archive submission from 2019, Madison said. But the structural logic is identical. Variable names changed, framing adjusted, but the underlying mathematical relationship is the same." Paulson set down his pen. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the table. "I was aware of that submission," he said finally. I found it during my own research in 2020. It had already been withdrawn. Did you cite it? It was withdrawn, he said. You don't cite withdrawn papers. You don't plagiarize them either. The word landed in the room and sat there. Paulson's jaw tightened. I developed that equation independently. The structural similarity. Gregory. She used his first name, which she didn't usually do. I've been in this field long enough to know the difference between parallel development and borrowing. That equation didn't arrive at the same logical destination from two different directions. That is the same equation. He was quiet for a long moment. The coffee machine across the room made a small noise. Someone in the hallway outside laughed at something. Who withdrew the paper? She said. I don't know, he said. Did you? No. He said it flat and hard, and she believed him on that. I found it already withdrawn. It had no institutional backing. The Cornell affiliation didn't check out when I looked, and there was no way to reach the author, whoever they actually were. I thought... He stopped. You thought what? He looked up at her, and for a moment he looked tired. Old tired, not sleep tired. I thought it was someone who couldn't finish what they started, who'd put something into the archive and then walked away. I told myself I was building on abandoned work. You told yourself that, Madison said. It's what I believed at the time. And now? He didn't answer. She stood up. His name is Logan Hayes. He's not hard to find anymore. She pushed her chair in. I think about what you want to say to him before this day is over. She found Logan on his lunch break. He was sitting on a low concrete wall at the back of the loading dock, out of the wind, eating a sandwich from the vending machine, the kind wrapped in plastic that costs $1.70 and tastes approximately like the packaging. He was looking at something on his phone, and he didn't hear her approach until she was close. He looked up. He didn't look surprised to see her, which was either because he'd been expecting something like this, or because he'd gotten very good at not looking surprised by things. You've seen the article, she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus showed me, he said. She sat down on the wall at a careful distance, not close like they were friends, not far like she was still the CEO and he was still the janitor, somewhere in the honest middle. I talked to Paulson, she said. He was quiet. He admits he built on your work, she said. He didn't acknowledge you, didn't try to find you. He told himself the paper was abandoned. Logan looked at the parking lot. There was a truck backing into a loading bay, slow and loud, and the mechanical beeping of it filled the silence for a moment. Did he know about my wife? He said. I don't think so, she said. I don't think he knew any of it. He found a withdrawn paper with a name and a fake affiliation, and he made a choice. Logan nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, she repeated. That's it? What do you want me to say? I don't know. Something. It's your work. He was quiet for a moment. He took another bite of the bad sandwich and chewed it and swallowed. My wife died 2 days after I submitted that paper, he said. I wasn't thinking about the paper. I wasn't thinking about research or publication or any of it. I was thinking about... He stopped. I was thinking about Nora. She was 6 days old, and she needed... There was a lot. There was a lot happening at once. Madison said nothing. I didn't withdraw it. I didn't touch it. I had other things happening. I assumed it would just sit there. And then at some point I tried to log back in and it was gone. He paused. I didn't chase it. I had a newborn and no income, and I needed to figure out a different way to live. Research wasn't that. Someone removed it, she said. Yeah. And we need to find out who. She looked at him. Will you let us dig into it? Why? It was a real question. She could tell from the way he asked it. Not suspicious, not dismissive. Genuinely, why do you want this? Because there's a $50 million challenge going on in that building, she said, and the person most qualified to solve it is eating a vending machine sandwich in a parking lot. And because, she paused, and what she said next came out less polished than she would have liked. Because I made a joke at your expense yesterday in front of a room full of people, and I've been thinking about that more than I'd like to admit. But Logan looked at her. You want me to compete, he said. I want you to have the option. My shift ends at 6. The Prometheus panel is at 4, she said. I can get you a floor pass. You don't have to go anywhere near the stage. You can just watch, if you want. He looked at the parking lot again. I'll think about it, he said. She stood up. She had a panel to introduce at 1 o'clock and 17 unread messages on her phone and a situation that was growing faster than she could manage. But she stood there for a second longer than she needed to. The Cornell affiliation on your submission, she said. Was that real? I had a visiting researcher agreement, he said. Informal. A professor there, Dr. Hartwell, he'd been following my work online. We corresponded. He offered me the affiliation so I'd have an institutional home for the paper. He looked at his hands. He died in 2020. Heart attack. I tried to confirm the affiliation through the department after my wife died, and nobody there knew who I was. The concrete wall was cold. The parking lot was loud. The truck had finished backing in and the beeping had stopped and the world had gone back to its ordinary noise. Okay, Madison said. Thank you. She walked back inside. She was 3 steps from the service entrance when her phone rang. Not Priya, a number she didn't recognize. She answered out of instinct. Ms. Reed. The voice was male, measured, the tone of someone who's learned to sound relaxed as a professional skill. My name is Victor Hale. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Nexus Group. We've been following the events at your summit with some interest. Nexus Group, she knew the name. Private equity firm with heavy AI sector exposure. The kind of outfit that moved through the industry like weather. You didn't always see them until they were already there. Mr. Hale, she said, this isn't a great time. I understand. I'll be brief. A pause. There's a narrative developing around a former researcher and your event. We think that narrative could become complicated quickly, and we'd like to get ahead of it together. Complicated how? If this Logan Hayes is who the internet is starting to think he is, Hale said, then there are intellectual property questions that could involve several parties, including Paulson, whose work our firm has licensed. Another pause. We think the cleanest outcome is for this story to deflate, naturally, before the afternoon session. Madison stopped walking. Are you asking me to bury a man's work twice? She said. A brief silence. Then, we're asking you to think about the complexity of the situation. I've thought about it, she said. Thanks for calling. She hung up. She stood in the service corridor for a moment, very still, with the phone in her hand. Then she called Priya. Get me our legal team and our head of communications, she said. Both of them. My office. 15 minutes. She started walking. And pull everything you can find on a Victor Hale at Nexus Group. Should I ask what this is about? Someone just made a mistake, Madison said. I want to make sure I don't make the same one. At 3:15, 45 minutes before the Prometheus panel was scheduled to begin, a second article dropped. This one wasn't careful. This one had done the work. The headline read, Was the foundation of modern AI alignment theory built on stolen research? It named Paulson. It named the withdrawn paper. It named Logan Hayes and included his photo from the summit video. Still frame, caught midpoint toward the equation on the screen, uniform and all. And in the body of the piece, buried in paragraph 7, a detail that Priya found and flagged and brought to Madison's office at a run. The withdrawal request in the Cornell archive system had not been submitted by L.J. Hayes. The IP address traced to a server registered to a consulting firm that had been dissolved in 2021. The firm's last known client, before it dissolved, was Nexus Group. Madison read the paragraph twice. Her legal team read it. Her communications director read it. The room was very quiet. He didn't withdraw it, Madison said. No, said her lawyer. Someone withdrew it for him, without his knowledge. While his wife was dying. Nobody said anything. She looked up from the paper. Where's Logan Hayes right now? Priya checked her phone. East Wing, 3rd floor. He's got a floor assignment until 4. Madison stood up. Get him a floor pass, she said, and get him to the Prometheus panel. Priya found him on the 3rd floor East Wing at 3:22, pushing a cart past a row of exhibit booths that had been vacated for the afternoon session. She was slightly out of breath, She'd taken the stairs because the service elevator was slow, and she came around the corner fast enough that Logan stopped walking just to avoid a collision. "Sorry," she said. "Hi, I'm Priya, Madison Reed's assistant." "I know who you are," Logan said. "We met this morning when you told Marcus about the corridor clearance." She blinked. "Right. Yes." She pulled herself together. "Madison needs you at the Prometheus panel. It starts in 37 minutes, and there's something you need to know before it does." Logan looked at his cart. He looked at the hallway ahead of him, which still had work in it. "I'm on the clock," he said. "I know. She cleared it with your supervisor." Priya held out the floor pass, a lanyard with a gold stripe, the kind that got you anywhere in the building. "Please." He looked at the lanyard for a moment. Then he took it. "Macham." Madison's temporary office was a converted storage room on the second floor that had been upgraded with a folding table, 3 chairs, and enough electricity to run the equipment Priya needed. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. And right now it held Madison, her lawyer, a compact woman named Claire Nguyen, who had the particular stillness of someone who had seen worse than this, and a communications director named James Park, who was standing near the door with the posture of a man calculating how fast things could go wrong. Logan came in, still in his uniform, lanyard around his neck. He took in the room. He didn't say anything. "Sit down," Madison said. Not a command. An invitation with urgency in it. He sat. She slid the printed article across the table toward him, the one that had dropped at 3:15. He read it. He read it carefully, which took longer than most people expected because he actually read things rather than skimming, and the room was quiet while he did. When he got to paragraph 7, the IP address, the dissolved consulting firm, the Nexus Group connection, something in his face went very still. The kind of still that isn't blankness, the kind that happens when a thing you suspected for years turns out to be exactly as bad as you suspected, and being right about it doesn't feel like winning. "They withdrew it," he said. Flat, not a question. "The technical record suggests it was withdrawn from a server connected to a firm that worked for Nexus Group," Claire said, precise with the language the way lawyers are precise. "We can't prove intent yet, but the timeline is—" "While my wife was in the hospital," Logan said. Claire paused. "Yes." He set the paper down. He put both hands flat on the table and looked at them. "Victor Hale called me this morning," Madison said, "before this article came out. He asked me to help the story go away." Logan looked up. "I didn't," she said. "In case that wasn't clear." "Why not?" It was a real question. She recognized that by now. He asked real questions, not rhetorical ones. He actually wanted to know the answer. "Because it would have been wrong," she said, and then because that sounded too clean. "And because I was already in it. I'm the one who put you on that stage yesterday. Whatever happens next, that's partly on me." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he looked back at the article. "What does this do to the panel?" he said. "The panel happens at 4 regardless," Madison said. "The 4 competing teams are still competing. The challenge is still live." She paused. "But this article has 190,000 reads right now, and it's climbing. The live stream has been running all day. Whatever happens in that room at 4 o'clock is going to happen in front of a very large audience. And someone wants to keep me out of it," he said. "Someone tried to call me this morning to make that happen," she said, "which means they're worried about what you can do in that room." Logan was quiet. James Park, from near the door, spoke for the first time. "There's also a complication. Nexus Group issued a statement 20 minutes ago. They're claiming the research in that archived paper infringes on proprietary work developed by their AI subsidiary, Stratum Labs. They're asserting that Logan Hayes, if he participates in the Prometheus challenge, would be submitting work that belongs to them." "That's insane," Logan said. He said it without heat, just as a factual correction. "I wrote that paper 2 years before Stratum Labs even existed as a company. Their subsidiary wasn't incorporated until 2021. "We know that," Claire said, "but the claim creates legal uncertainty, and under the summit's participation rules, a competitor can be suspended pending resolution of an IP dispute." "Who filed the dispute?" Logan said. "Nexus Group. Filed it 40 minutes ago, directly with the summit's ethics committee. Claire looked at Madison. Which means the committee has to consider it before the panel begins. The room absorbed this. Logan looked at the article again, then at the ceiling. Then, with the particular focus of someone thinking through a problem they've seen before, he said, "They don't actually think the claim will hold. They know it won't hold. They're using the filing to create delay." "Yes," Madison said. "They need me out of that room for one specific block of time," he said. The live broadcast window. After today, the story changes. The article's out, the video's viral, it's harder to manage. But if they can keep me off that stage today, they still control the narrative tonight. They can say the challenge ran cleanly, their version of the research history is the established record, and I'm just some guy who used to work in a lab. He looked at Madison. "That's what this is," he said. "That's what this is," she agreed. He exhaled slowly. "How much time does the ethics committee need?" he said. "Claire thinks 2 hours, minimum," Madison said. "The panel runs from 4 to 6. "Yes." He sat back in his chair. He looked like what he was, a man who was tired, who had been tired for a long time, who had made peace with the shape of his life, and was now watching someone try to use that peace against him. The resignation of it was worse than anger would have been. Anger implies you still believe fighting will help. "Logan," Madison said, "look at me." He looked at her. "I'm not asking you to fight this for the prize," she said. "I know you don't care about the money, but there are 50,000 people watching that broadcast right now. By 4 o'clock, there will be more. And every one of them is about to watch a story about how this industry works, who gets credited, who gets buried, who gets to stand on the stage, and who gets handed a mop." She paused. "I was the person who handed you the mop, metaphorically speaking, yesterday, in front of a room full of cameras, and I'm asking you to let me fix that." Logan was quiet for a long moment. "The ethics committee," he said finally. "Can you go to them directly?" "I'm already scheduled," Claire said. "Then go," he said. "I'll be at the panel." The main hall at 355 was a different room than it had been the previous morning. Partly that was the crowd. Standing room, people lining the walls, a journalist density that had roughly doubled since noon. The livestream camera rigs had been repositioned to wider angles, which in Logan's experience usually meant the broadcast team expected something they hadn't planned for. He stood near the back wall with his floor pass lanyard and watched people find their seats. He was still in his work uniform. He hadn't had time to change, and honestly it hadn't occurred to him as a priority. If it read badly, it read badly. He'd spent 8 years not worrying about how things read. Dr. Paulson was already at the panel table on stage, one of 5 chairs arranged in a loose arc, facing the audience. He was looking at something on his phone with the careful attention of a man who was reading bad news slowly, hoping it would change. The other panelists were filing in. Dr. Cho from MIT, small and sharp-eyed and moving with the efficiency of someone who already knew what they were there to do. Dr. Voronov from Nexus Labs, which created an awkward geometry given the morning's events. He was thick-shouldered and professionally neutral, the expression of a man who had separated his science from his employer's legal games. Dr. Reyes from Stanford, the youngest of the 4, who kept glancing at her phone and then putting it away and then picking it up again. Marcus appeared at Logan's elbow. "You're really doing this," Marcus said in a low voice. "I'm watching," Logan said. "You've got a floor pass." "I'm watching with a floor pass." Marcus looked at him for a second. "You know you could." "Marcus?" "Yeah? Let me watch." Marcus backed off. James Fielding, the Tech Chronicle moderator, opened the panel at 4:02 with the slightly elevated energy of someone who knew they were moderating a famous moment and was trying not to let that awareness make them stiff. "Welcome to the Prometheus Challenge panel," he said. "For those joining us on the live stream, we're currently at 68,000 concurrent viewers, which I'm told is a summit record." Modest applause from the room. "We have 4 competing teams here today, each attempting to present a viable solution framework to the alignment cascade problem. As a reminder, the winning solution must be verifiable, scalable, and independently confirmed by the judging panel before the prize is awarded." He went through the rules. Logan had heard the rules before. They'd been on the display board for 2 days. He wasn't listening to the rules. He was looking at the problem statement on the main screen. The full version now, all 3 parameter clusters, all the cascade conditions. He'd been looking at pieces of it for 2 days, and he'd been thinking about it the way he thought about things he couldn't completely stop thinking about. In the background, while he was doing other things, like a program running in a browser tab you're not currently looking at. The first team presented at 4:10, Dr. Cho's group from MIT. It was solid work, genuinely solid, the kind that would have been impressive in any context that wasn't this specific problem. They'd addressed the surface-level cascade failures with an elegant iterative correction system. The room gave them real applause, the kind that means something. But the correction system assumed stable constraint parameters. Logan watched Paulson notice it too, from across the room. Their eyes didn't meet. The second team, Dr. Reyes from Stanford, was more aggressive. She presented a full architectural reconstruction, which was ambitious. She'd clearly been working on the right intuition, that the problem was in the framework, not the optimization. But the reconstruction she proposed created 3 new instability points in the higher recursive layers, which she acknowledged in her presentation with the directness of someone who knows where their own gaps are. The room appreciated her for that. At 4:47, between the second and third presentations, Madison Reed walked to the front of the room. She didn't take the stage. She stood at the floor level, below the stage lip, which was a specific choice. It was more honest than the stage, more visible than the audience. She had a microphone, and she used it. "I want to address something before we continue," she said. "As most of you know from what's been published this afternoon, there is an IP dispute claim that was filed against a potential 4th competitor in this challenge earlier today. The claim was reviewed by our ethics committee." She paused. "They found it without merit. The timeline of the research predates the claimant's corporate entity by 2 years. The dispute has been dismissed." Murmuring in the room. Significant murmuring. "Additionally," Madison said, "and I want to be clear that I'm saying this publicly because I think the public record matters. It has come to our attention that a research paper relevant to this challenge was removed from a public archive in 2019 without the author's knowledge or consent. We believe this was done to suppress the work and clear the way for derivative research to proceed without attribution." She looked out at the room. "We take that seriously. Our legal team is in contact with the relevant parties." She looked at Paulson when she said that last part. The room saw it. "If Logan Hayes is willing," she said, "we'd like to open the Prometheus challenge to a 4th competitor." The room went very quiet. Logan was at the back wall. 68,000 people were watching on a live stream, and in the room, 400 people turned, in the way crowds turn, toward the back, not because they knew where he was exactly, but because attention has a physics, and it was pulling toward the person who hadn't spoken yet. Marcus beside him said nothing. Logan stood there. He was thinking about Nora in the same way he was always thinking about Nora when something large and disorienting happened. Not because she was a safety net or a fallback, but because she was the thing that had always clarified what mattered. She was at school right now. She was probably in science class or maybe lunch period, completely unaware that her father was standing at the back of a room with 400 people and 68,000 cameras pointed in his general direction. He thought about Emma. He didn't let himself do that often. It was a door he kept most of the way closed, not because the grief wasn't real, but because it was real enough to drown in if you let it. But right now he thought about her, about the paper she'd never known he'd submitted, about the week after Nora was born, the chaos and the terror and the specific unbearable love of it, and then the other thing happening at the same time, the thing that split the world in two. About the work he'd done, the years of it, the equations that had come out of him like breathing, when he was 24 and 26 and 28, and the world still felt like it was getting larger instead of smaller. About the morning, 8 years ago, when he'd realized he couldn't go back to research because there was no one else to pick up Nora from daycare. He'd made peace with it. He genuinely had. Not performance peace, not gritted teeth peace, real peace, the kind that comes when you stop measuring your life against the life you didn't live. But there was a difference between peace and permission. And someone had taken the choice from him. That was the thing. He'd chosen to leave. He'd chosen Nora, and that choice was clean, and he'd never regretted it. But someone had also stolen the option of choosing anything else, and they'd done it quietly while he was in a hospital waiting room, and they'd been living on the proceeds ever since. He reached up and adjusted the floor pass lanyard. He started walking. What? The room noticed him before he reached the stage. Not because he made noise, he didn't, but because the crowd parted the way crowds part for things that feel inevitable. And by the time he was halfway down the center aisle, the room had gone from murmuring to something that wasn't quite silence, but was pointed in the same direction. He stepped up onto the stage. Madison was still at floor level, below the stage. She looked up at him. He looked back at her. He said quietly enough that only she could hear, "When this is over, I'm still picking up Nora at 7. She nodded. "I know." He turned to face the room. Up close, the panel table looked different than it had from the back wall. Smaller, more ordinary. The other panelists were looking at him with a range of expressions. Cho with cautious respect, Reyes with open curiosity, Voronov with a careful neutrality he was working to maintain, Paulson with something complicated on his face, looking at the table. Fielding, the moderator, recovered first. "We'll take a brief intermission before the fourth presentation," he said into his microphone, with the presence of mind of a man who'd done live television before. The room exhaled. In the 10-minute break, Logan sat at the end of the panel table and looked at the full problem statement on the screen. Paulson slid his chair 2 feet closer and said quietly, "I need to say something." Logan looked at him. "I told myself the work was abandoned," Paulson said. "I want you to know that. I don't think it excuses what I did, but I didn't know. About your wife. About any of it. I found the paper in an archive and it was already gone, and I thought—" He stopped. "You thought it was safe," Logan said. "Yes." "I'm not going to pretend that makes it okay," Logan said. "I'm not asking you to." Logan looked at him for a long moment. Paulson was a brilliant man. Logan had known that from reading his work, even the work that had been built, without attribution, on his own foundation. Brilliance didn't cover everything. "The equation in your 2021 paper," Logan said. "You made it better, actually. The way you extended it into the third recursive layer, that was yours. I hadn't gotten there." Paulson blinked. "I'm telling you that because it's true," Logan said, "not because it makes everything okay." He turned back to the screen. When Fielding brought the broadcast back and introduced the fourth presentation, the live stream counter was at 91,000. Logan stood up. He didn't have a presentation deck. He didn't have slides. He had the problem statement on the screen behind him and a marker that one of the AV staff had quietly left on the panel table during the break. He picked up the marker. "The problem as stated has a structural assumption baked into it," he said. "Not a mistake, an assumption. Whoever wrote the original problem statement was working from the same theoretical framework everyone's been working from for 3 years, which means the assumption felt invisible. That's how foundational errors work. You don't see them because you're inside them." He went to the whiteboard that Fielding had a staff member wheel onto the stage during the break, a piece of foresight that Logan noticed and was grateful for, without saying so. He wrote the first equation, clean, fast, the handwriting of someone who'd put this specific notation on paper hundreds of times. "The constraint-weighting function," he said. "This is how it's written in the problem statement. Fixed coefficient, applied across all recursive iterations. The assumption is that this coefficient is stable, but look at what it's actually weighting," he wrote the second line. "The variable it's operating on is a function of layer depth. It's not stable. It fluctuates with every recursion. So every time you apply this fixed coefficient to a fluctuating variable, your system accumulates error. Small errors at first, then they compound. By the time you reach real-world scale, you've got a cascade." He paused and looked at the room. "The question isn't how to correct the cascade after it starts. The question is how to make the coefficient adaptive, so it tracks the variable in real time, instead of assuming the variable is constant." He wrote the third equation. "This is a dynamic weighting function. It was derived from work I did in 2019 and never properly published. He said that last part without editorializing, just as a fact. The function adjusts the coefficient value at each recursive iteration based on the current layer depth measurement. The cascade doesn't form because the system is continuously self-correcting for the variable's fluctuation. Silence. This isn't a new theory, he said. The mathematical class this function belongs to has been around for a while. What's new is applying it to this specific problem architecture. And the reason nobody's done it before, he paused, is because it requires acknowledging that the problem statement contains an incorrect assumption, which is hard to do when the problem statement is your foundation. He set down the marker. He looked at the room. He looked at the 400 faces, at the cameras, at the live stream rigs. The solution has 3 implementation steps, he said. I can walk through all of them. He turned back to the whiteboard. 22 minutes later, Logan Hayes finished speaking. The room was quiet for 3 seconds. The particular quiet that isn't uncertainty, that's the thing that happens when a group of people need a brief moment to absorb something that has just rearranged their understanding of a thing they thought they understood. Then Dr. Cho said, from his seat at the panel table, clearly and without any performance, "That's correct." And the room came apart. Not chaos, not noise for noise's sake. The standing applause that started from the scientists in the front rows had real weight in it. The particular relief of people who've been pushing against a locked door for 3 years and just watched someone find the key. Fielding was saying something into his microphone that Logan couldn't hear over the noise. Logan stood at the whiteboard with the marker in his hand. He wasn't looking at the audience. He was looking at the equations on the board, checking them the way he always checked things. One more time, just to be sure. They were right. He knew they were right. He'd known they were right for years, in the part of his mind that never completely stopped. He set the marker down on the whiteboard tray. He looked up at the room. For one brief, unguarded second, something crossed his face that wasn't composure and wasn't performance. It was something older and more private, the expression of a person who has held something quietly for a very long time and has just, in front of more people than they'd planned, put it down. Then it passed. In the back of the room, Marcus was standing on his tiptoes to see over the crowd, with an expression on his face like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be this proud of someone he'd known for a few years. On the stage, Paulson was sitting with his elbows on the table and his hands folded, looking at Logan's equations on the whiteboard. His expression was not comfortable, but it was honest. And at floor level, below the stage, Madison Reed was standing with her arms crossed and her phone in her hand, and she wasn't looking at the crowd or the cameras. She was looking at Logan. She was thinking about the corridor that morning, and the concrete wall in the parking lot, and the bad vending machine sandwich, and the thing he'd said to her before he walked onto the stage. "I'm still picking up Nora at 7. She was thinking about what it takes to carry something that long, that quietly. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. It was a text from Victor Hale. "This isn't over." She put the phone in her pocket without responding and turned back to watch Logan Hayes stand in the middle of what he'd built, 8 years late, in a room that was only now beginning to understand what it had missed. Victor Hale's text sat in Madison's pocket like something with a temperature. She didn't respond to it during the applause. She didn't respond to it during the 10 minutes after the panel ended, when the room refused to clear out. When journalists and researchers crowded toward the stage, and Fielding was trying to manage the floor with the cheerful desperation of a man whose moderating script had become irrelevant. She didn't respond to it when Priya appeared at her elbow with 4 urgent messages from media partners, and one from the summit's board chair, who had been watching the live stream from his hotel room 2 blocks away and wanted a call. She didn't respond to it at all. What she did was watch Logan. He was at the whiteboard still, because 3 researchers had immediately moved to ask him questions, and he was answering them with the same methodical focus he'd had during the presentation. No performance, no savoring the moment, just working through the specifics with whoever was in front of him. Dr. Reyes from Stanford was one of them, leaning forward with her notebook open, asking something about the 3rd implementation step. Dr. Cho was standing slightly back, listening, his expression that of someone who is both genuinely impressed and also running through the implications for his own work. Paulson had left the stage. Madison had watched him go. No drama, no confrontation with Logan, just a man who walked off a stage and through a side door, carrying something she suspected he'd be carrying for a while. Logan finished answering Reyes's question, then glanced at his watch. She saw it from where she was standing. A small, automatic gesture, the kind that's not about the time, so much as about what the time means. She moved through the crowd toward the stage. The judging panel needs 2 hours to formally verify the solution, she said, when she got close enough to be heard at a normal volume. The researchers around him heard her, and with the social awareness of people who understood an executive conversation when they saw one, created a small amount of space. I know, Logan said. Priya texted me. You gave her your number? She asked for it. Madison glanced at Priya, who was hovering at a professional distance and looking at her tablet with focused innocence. The prize committee will want to meet with you tomorrow morning, Madison said. Formal verification is standard. It doesn't mean... I know what it means, Logan said. I've been through peer review before. Right, she paused. The live stream is at 112,000 viewers. That number is still climbing. Okay. There are 17 media requests for interviews, minimum. I have to pick up Nora at 7, he said. I know, you've mentioned that. I mention it because it's the actual constraint on my evening. He said it without irritation, just as a fact. The same way he'd said everything else. Madison looked at him for a moment. Can I ask you something? You're going to ask it regardless. Probably true. She crossed her arms. When you walked up that aisle, you knew what it meant. Not just tonight. The whole chain of things that would follow. Media, legal proceedings, depositions probably, your name in every tech publication for the next 3 months. You knew all of that. Yes. And you still did it. Yes. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone avoiding the question, the quiet of someone who has an honest answer that they're deciding whether to give. Because somebody took something that wasn't theirs to take, he said, and they did it at the specific moment when I couldn't do anything about it, and they did it knowing that. He paused. I've been okay with the life I have. I mean that I'm not standing here pretending I've been bitter and miserable for 8 years. I made a choice, and I've lived it, and Nora she's everything. But I didn't like that they got to make the choice for me. That's different. Madison nodded slowly. And Nora, she said, she know any of this is happening? She knows I had a weird day, he said. She knows about the science fair. She knows nothing about the summit. She knows I work at the Meridian Grand. She knows I clean things. He looked at Madison levelly. I didn't tell her about going up on that stage yesterday because I didn't know how to explain it without explaining the whole history. And she's 8. She doesn't need the whole history. At some point, she'll need to know. At some point, he agreed. Tonight she needs dinner and help with her science fair data. He picked up the marker from the whiteboard tray and set it on the panel table with the finality of someone done for the day, and looked at her, waiting. Go, she said. He left. The next 40 minutes were the specific kind of controlled chaos that Madison had spent years learning to manage. The kind where nothing is technically on fire, but every conversation is urgent, and several of them are pulling in different directions simultaneously. The board chair called and was cautiously enthusiastic, which was his mode for everything. He liked what had happened on the broadcast. He liked the visibility. He did not like the legal exposure around the IP dispute, which was fair, and he wanted a full brief by morning, which Madison promised. 2 of the summit's major sponsors called within 10 minutes of each other, both with variations of the same sentiment. This had been an extraordinary day for the event, and they were very proud to be associated with it. Neither of them mentioned Victor Hale or Nexus Group, which meant they'd both already made calculations. Then Claire Nguyen came in with the thing Madison had been waiting for. She closed the door behind her, which in Madison's experience was always a signal, and sat down across the folding table with a tablet and a printed document, and the expression of someone delivering news that is simultaneously good and complicated. The IP dispute has been formally dismissed, Claire said. The Ethics Committee issued their written decision 20 minutes ago. Timeline of the archive submission predates Stratum Labs Incorporation by 22 months. The claim had no legal basis. That's the good part, Madison said. What's the complicated part? Nexus Group is not going away quietly. Claire turned the tablet around. They issued a public statement 6 minutes ago. They're not pursuing the IP claim anymore, but they're alleging that the summit itself mishandled the review process, that the dismissal was influenced by Madison Reed's personal interest in the outcome, and that Logan Hayes' participation should be voided on procedural grounds. Madison read the statement. It was well written. She could tell it had been drafted by someone good, someone who knew exactly which words would generate the most friction in a media cycle. They're trying to invalidate the result, she said. They can't, Claire said. Procedurally, the challenge rules give the host organization the authority to resolve disputes, and the ethics committee followed proper process. There's no mechanism for them to void the result. She paused. But they can make noise. They can create a version of events where this looks tainted, and if that narrative gets traction before the formal prize verification, it makes Logan's win look contested, Madison said. It makes your entire summit look contested, Claire said, which is worse for you in some ways. Madison sat back. She knew Victor Hale. Not personally. They'd been in the same rooms a few times, at industry events, the kind of ambient familiarity that powerful people in overlapping fields accumulate. He was smart and patient, and he played the long game. He'd lost today, but he wasn't someone who accepted a loss without reframing it as a tactical retreat. What do we have on the archive withdrawal, she said. The IP address, the dissolved firm, how solid is that chain? Solid enough for our purposes, Claire said. Solid enough to create problems for them if they push. The question is whether Logan is willing to pursue it formally. He'll do what he decides is right, Madison said. I can't speak for him. You're going to need to talk to him about it. I know. Her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it. A message from James Park, her communications director. Nexus statement is trending. We need a response in the next 30 minutes or the story moves without us. She thought for a moment. Then she typed back, Don't respond yet. Give me 20 minutes. She looked at Claire. Get me everything we have on the archive withdrawal in a clean brief. Everything verifiable. Nothing speculative. I want it in 15 minutes. You're going to make a statement, Claire said. I'm going to make a statement, Madison said. She made the statement at 6:48, not a press release. She'd considered a press release and decided against it because press releases felt like managing distance, and distance was exactly the wrong move right now. Instead, she walked to the media area at the back of the main hall, where the cameras from the live stream were still running. The summit's broadcast day technically ended at 6, but the production team had been extending it in real time as the story kept moving, and she stood in front of them and she talked. She was not reading from anything. Today, something happened at this summit that I didn't plan, she said. A man who was here to clean the floors of this building walked onto our stage and demonstrated that he understood the most complex problem in our field better than anyone in the room. That happened because I put him in that position as a joke, which was a failure of judgment on my part that I want to be clear about. She looked directly at the camera. His name is Logan Hayes. He is the author of a research paper that was submitted in 2019 and withdrawn from the public archive without his knowledge, at a moment in his personal life when he was not in a position to notice or fight back. The research in that paper formed the foundational basis for work that was subsequently published by others, without attribution, and which became the theoretical cornerstone of a significant body of commercial AI research. She let that sit for a beat. Earlier today, a company with financial interests in that commercial research filed a frivolous IP claim to block Logan from participating in our challenge. That claim was reviewed and dismissed. Now that same company is attempting to characterize our process as compromised. She paused. I want to be direct. The evidence we hold regarding the archive withdrawal, including the IP address records and the connection to the firm responsible, has been provided to our legal team and will be made available to any relevant regulatory or investigative authority that requests it. She was not performing calm. She was actually calm, which is a different thing and reads differently on camera. Logan Hayes solved the Prometheus challenge today in front of more than 100,000 people. That solution is real. The judging panel will verify it formally tomorrow, and when they do, the result will stand. She paused one more time. I also want to say publicly, because I should have said it differently yesterday. I judged someone by what they were wearing, and I was wrong to do that, and I'm sorry. She stepped back from the camera. The live stream counter, which Priya had been watching from across the room, hit 137,000. Logan was at the community center parking lot at 6:58 when his phone started moving in a way that was clearly not normal. He'd kept it in his pocket during the drive. He always kept it in his pocket while driving. Nora had established that rule at age 6 with the firmness of someone who had been watching road safety videos in school and took them seriously. He pulled into the parking lot and cut the engine and picked up the phone. 14 missed calls, 40-something texts, 3 voicemails. His email notification was showing a number with 3 digits. He looked at it for a moment. Then he put the phone face down on the passenger seat and got out of the car. Nora came out of the community center doors with her backpack and her science fair project folder and the marker streak still on her forearm because she'd clearly chosen not to wash it off, which was a decision he respected even if it was wrong. "You're on time," she said, like this was a surprise. "I'm always on time," he said. "You were late on the 14th. There was a water main situation." "That's what you said." She got into the car and buckled her seatbelt with the ceremonial focus he'd come to love. "Also, there's something on your phone. It keeps buzzing." "I know. Is it work?" "Sort of." She looked at him with the particular evaluative expression she'd developed somewhere around age 6 and refined steadily since, head slightly tilted, eyes slightly narrowed, the expression of someone who suspects there is more information available and is deciding whether to pursue it. "Is it the weird day?" she said. "Yes." "The good weird or bad weird?" He pulled out of the parking lot. "I think it's landing on good," he said. "I'm not completely sure yet." She accepted this. She looked out the window for a moment, then said, "Can we have pasta?" "It is a pasta night," he agreed. "What?" He didn't look at his phone until Nora was asleep. She'd gone to bed at 9:15 after 45 minutes of science fair data work. They'd set up a proper control group structure, the kind that would actually hold up to a teacher's scrutiny, and she'd been quietly proud of the result in the way kids are proud when something clicks. He'd made pasta. They'd watched 20 minutes of a nature documentary about deep-sea fish, which Nora had opinions about. He'd read to her, which she was technically old enough not to need but still wanted, and he'd turned off her lamp at 9:04 and she'd been asleep by 9:10. He sat at the kitchen table with the phone. He went through it methodically, not because he wasn't surprised by the volume, he was, genuinely, but because methodical was how he operated, and chaos was easier to handle when you sorted it into categories. Journalists. He didn't respond to any of them. Not yet, not without thinking. Former colleagues, there were 3, which was more than he expected. People from the Cornell correspondence years, from before. One of them was a message from a woman named Dr. Aisha Morrow, who he'd known briefly during the Dr. Hartwell period, who had apparently followed his work online and who wrote, with a directness he appreciated, "Logan, I saw the broadcast. I know some of what happened in 2019. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry I didn't. If you need documentation, I have some. Call me." He read that one twice. He put the phone down on the table. Then he picked it back up and opened Madison Reed's message, which was in the middle of everything else, time-stamped at 7:22. "I made a public statement tonight. You should see it before someone else sends it to you. I don't expect you to agree with all of it. I did try to be accurate. Also, Nexus Group is not done. I think you know that. We should talk tomorrow before the formal verification meeting." He set the phone on the table. He looked at the kitchen. The pasta bowl still in the drying rack, the nature documentary still paused on the TV screen, Nora's science fair folder on the counter. The ordinary weight of an ordinary evening. He watched Madison's statement on his phone, sitting at the kitchen table just before 10. He watched it once, then watched it again. Then he sat there for a while. He'd spent 8 years building a life that was specific in its shape, not what he'd planned, not what anyone would have designed from the outside, but his. Solid in the places that mattered. He'd done it without thinking about the work he'd left behind. Or mostly without. He'd done it one early morning at a time, one shift at a time, one homework session and one pasta dinner and one 20-minute nature documentary at a time. And now the thing he had left behind was back. Not because he'd gone looking for it, but because someone in a main hall 2 days ago had thought it would be funny to hand a microphone to a janitor. He didn't know what came next. That was an honest statement. He didn't know in any specific way. There would be the formal verification tomorrow, and whatever Nexus Group did next, and Claire Nguyen and the legal chain around the archive withdrawal, and 17 journalists who wanted something from him, and Dr. Aisha Moro, who had documentation. There was a lot of machinery in motion that he had not started and could not fully stop. He texted Madison back. "I saw it. It was accurate." He paused, then added, "What time tomorrow?" Her reply came in under a minute, 9 a.m. "I'll send the location. Thank you for today." He thought about that for a second. Then he typed, "You put me on that stage as a joke." 3 dots appeared, then, "I know. I'm going to spend a while being embarrassed about that." "Good," he typed. Then, because it was honest, "Thank you for not burying it." He put the phone face down on the table. He sat in the quiet kitchen for another few minutes. Outside, the city was doing its late-night version of itself, the reduced power hum of it drifting through the window that didn't quite seal all the way. Somewhere 3.5 miles away, the Meridian Grand was settling into post-event quiet, the live stream finally dark, the chairs stacked, the whiteboard with his equations probably still sitting on the stage where nobody had moved it. He thought about those equations, about what they meant and what they'd cost, and what it had felt like to write them on a whiteboard in front of 100,000 people who had no idea they'd been sitting in a drawer for 8 years. It had felt like something, he admitted to himself, alone in the kitchen with no one watching. It had felt like something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. He got up, rinsed the remaining dishes, checked the door lock, turned off the kitchen light. He checked on Nora on the way to his room. Door cracked, lamp off, the soft sound of her breathing. Her science fair folder was on her nightstand where she'd moved it, like she wanted it close. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to bed. He didn't sleep for a while. Not because he was anxious exactly, but because his mind was doing what it did when a problem was partially solved, running the remaining parts, checking the edges, looking for what wasn't finished yet. There was still Nexus Group. There was still Victor Hale, who was not a man who accepted a clean loss. There was still the formal verification tomorrow, which would be straightforward, but not without pressure. There was still the question of what happened after the prize was formally awarded, after the legal proceedings around the archive found their shape, after the 112 journalists got whatever they were going to get. And there was Madison Reed, who had stood in front of a live broadcast and said the thing clearly, and who had texted him back in under a minute, and who was not. He was beginning to understand quite what he'd initially categorized her as. He'd categorized her as exactly what she'd seemed on the first day, the CEO performing for the room, making a joke at someone else's expense, running a summit with the ease of someone who'd never had to run anything difficult. And she was that partly. She was also something more complicated than that, which he hadn't expected and wasn't sure what to do with yet. He thought about the concrete wall in the parking lot, the bad sandwich, the way she'd said because it would have been wrong, directly, without smoothing it into something more palatable. He thought about Nora's marker-streaked arm, and pasta, and deep-sea fish. He thought about Emma, briefly, the way he allowed himself to, in the last quiet minutes before sleep. Not with the sharp grief of earlier years, but with the particular tenderness of someone who has carried a loss long enough to know its shape. I think it was a good weird day, he thought, in the direction of no one. Then he slept. At 9:47 that night, in a hotel suite 4 blocks from the Meridian Grand, Victor Hale was on a call with 3 people and a lawyer. The call was not going well. The statement Madison Reed had made on the live stream had created a problem he hadn't fully anticipated. Not because she'd said anything he hadn't expected, but because of how she'd said it. No press release, no managed distance, no corporate language. Just a woman standing in front of cameras saying true things in a way that was very hard to argue with without looking like exactly what he was. "We need to move tonight," he said. "Move how?" The lawyer's voice was careful. "The archive records. There has to be a gap in the chain, something that puts ambiguity between the IP address and our firm." Silence on the call. "Victor," the lawyer said, with the tone of someone who has been a lawyer for 20 years and has learned to hear certain sentences for what they are, "I need to stop you there. I'm not asking you to fabricate. I know what you're asking, and I'm telling you that I can't help you with it. And more importantly, I'm telling you that the documentation they referenced in that statement is already in the hands of their legal team. A pause. If what she described is accurate, and I think it is, then the chain is solid. You don't want to go near it. The line was quiet. The best move right now, the lawyer said, is to find a version of this where we're not the story anymore, where this is about Logan Hayes and the prize, and we're peripheral. We're not peripheral, Hale said. I know, that's the problem. Hale ended the call. He stood at the window of his hotel suite for a long time, looking at the city below, turning something over in his mind with the focused patience of someone who is very used to finding solutions to problems and is running, for the first time in a while, short of options. He picked up his phone again. He thought about calling someone. He had a list, always. People who could shift weight in various directions, who owed him or who needed him, or who simply operated in the same way he did, the long game way, the patient strategic way. He stood there for a while. Then he put the phone down without calling anyone. He'd built too much on the wrong foundation, and somewhere in the back of his mind, the part that was honest when he wasn't performing confidence, he'd known that for longer than he'd admitted. The dissolved firm, the archive record, the convenient withdrawal of a paper while its author was in a hospital waiting room. He told himself it was clean because nobody had looked closely. He told himself the work was abandoned because it was easier than the alternative. And now 137,000 people had watched the alternative walk onto a stage and solve the problem in 22 minutes. He was not a man who did self-pity. But standing at that window in the particular quiet of a day that had gone completely wrong, Victor Hale let himself feel the specific cold weight of having built something substantial on something rotten, and knowing that the reckoning had arrived and there was no version of the coming weeks that didn't cost him something real. He left the light on when he went to bed, which was not something he usually did. The formal verification meeting was scheduled for 9. Logan arrived at 8:52, which was not intentional. He'd hit less traffic than expected, and stood in the lobby of the Meridian Grand for a moment in the specific position of someone who is early and doesn't know what to do with that. He was wearing clean clothes, not a suit. He didn't own a suit that still fit correctly, and he'd decided somewhere around 7:30 that morning that wearing something that didn't fit correctly to prove he could dress up was worse than just wearing what he had. Dark jeans, a gray shirt, a jacket that was plain and presentable. He looked like himself, which was either right or wrong, depending on who was in the room. Priya met him at the elevator. "The judging panel is already set up on the 4th floor," she said, falling into step beside him. 5 members, Doctor. Cho is one of them, which is actually good for you because he confirmed the solution verbally on the broadcast and is not going to walk that back. Dr. Hartley from the National Research Consortium is the chair. She's thorough, and she doesn't do favors for anyone, which is also good for you. What's the format? You present the solution in full. They question you. If they're satisfied, they vote. All 5 need to confirm. It usually takes 3 hours. Usually? For solutions that are actually solutions, it moves faster. She glanced at him sideways. I've been doing this job for 4 years, and I've never seen a panel react the way yours did yesterday. Logan looked at the elevator buttons. Also, Priya said, with the slightly careful tone of someone delivering information they're not sure how to frame, Victor Hale requested a meeting with Madison this morning. She's with him right now. Logan looked at her. She wanted you to know before you went upstairs, Priya said. She'll be at the verification meeting. She said to tell you she'd be there by 9:15 at the latest. What does Hale want? She didn't say. She texted me 40 minutes ago that she was going in and would update me when it was done. The elevator opened. They got in. She'll be fine, Priya said, though Logan hadn't asked. He looked at her again. She's handled worse than Victor Hale, Priya said. I've watched her do it. Madison had arranged the meeting herself. That was important. She'd controlled the location, the time, the terms. She was sitting when Hale came in, which she'd done deliberately because standing would have looked like she was bracing, and sitting looked like someone who wasn't in a hurry. Hale was in his 50s, silver at the temples, the kind of face that had been handsome for a long time and knew it. He sat across from her with the careful ease of someone who had lost yesterday and was here today to negotiate the terms of a smaller loss. She didn't offer him coffee. I'll be direct, he said. Please, she said. Nexus Group is prepared to withdraw all public statements regarding the summit's process. We're prepared to acknowledge that the IP dispute was filed in error and that Logan Hayes' participation was procedurally sound. He paused. In exchange, we'd ask that Arcturus AI refrain from further public statements connecting Nexus Group to the archive withdrawal. Madison looked at him. That's it? She said. That's it. Victor. She said it the way she'd said Paulson's first name 2 days ago, not as familiarity, but as a signal that she was about to be specific. The evidence Claire's team has connects the withdrawal directly to a firm that was on your payroll. That evidence exists regardless of what either of us says publicly. Existing and being acted on are different things, he said. They are, she agreed. For now. But you're asking me to protect Nexus Group's public position in exchange for you stopping something you never had the right to start. That's not a trade. That's asking me not to tell the truth, in exchange for you agreeing not to lie anymore. Hale was quiet. Logan Hayes gets to decide what he does with the archive evidence, Madison said. Not me. I can't make you a promise about his choices, and I wouldn't try. She paused. What I can tell you is that the way out of this for your company is not managing me. The way out is to get ahead of it, acknowledge what happened, reach out to Logan directly, see if there's a version of this where you're paying a real cost instead of waiting to have one imposed on you. You're suggesting we approach him. I'm telling you that he's a reasonable person, which may surprise you. He's not chasing you. He doesn't want to burn anything down. She looked at Hale steadily. But he deserves to have the choice. Hale looked at her for a long moment. You could have taken the easy path on this, he said. It wasn't quite an accusation. It was almost something else. 2 days ago, before any of this escalated, you could have let the joke stay a joke. I know, she said. Why didn't you? She thought about it for a second. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to give him the accurate one. Because I was standing in that corridor watching him walk away, she said. And I realized I'd just done the same thing to him that the industry had been doing for 8 years. And I didn't want to be that story. Hale absorbed this. Your lawyers will be in touch, he said finally, standing. Yes, she said. They will. He left. She sat there for a moment after the door closed, alone with the particular feeling of a conversation that went the way it needed to go but cost something anyway. The specific tax of being direct with someone powerful, of choosing the harder version of a sentence when the easier version was right there. She texted Priya, on my way. The verification room on the 4th floor was smaller than she'd expected. A standard conference setup, round table, presentation screen, 5 panel members already in their seats when Madison came in at 9:14. Logan was at the front of the room, standing near the whiteboard, which had been freshly cleaned and had markers in the tray. He looked calm, not at ease exactly. There was still something measured about the way he held himself in rooms like this, like a person who had learned not to be too comfortable in spaces where other people held the power, but calm. He glanced at her when she came in. She gave him a small nod. He turned back to the panel. Dr. Hartley, the panel chair, was a compact woman in her 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and the specific authority of someone who had spent 4 decades being the smartest person in rooms and had stopped needing to prove it. She introduced the format efficiently. Full presentation of the solution, open questioning, deliberation, vote. Mr. Hayes, she said. Whenever you're ready, Shasin. He was ready. Logan presented for 41 minutes, which was longer than the previous day, but more thorough. This was not a room of 400 people who needed to understand the broad shape of the thing. This was 5 specialists who needed to tear it apart and confirm every seam. He went through the dynamic weighting function in full mathematical detail. He walked through the 3 implementation steps with the care of someone who has already anticipated where the questions will come from. He addressed the stability conditions at each recursive layer, the edge cases at extreme scale, the error tolerance thresholds. Hartley let him finish before she asked anything. The others were taking notes. Then she asked the first question, and it was a good question, the kind that's designed not to trip you up but to confirm that you're standing on solid ground. He answered it. She asked a second one. The man to her left, a researcher from a federal AI lab named Dr. Okonkwo, asked about the performance degradation curve at high parameter density. Logan drew it on the whiteboard. Okonkwo studied it, asked a clarifying question, got his answer, and wrote something in his notebook. Dr. Cho, across the table, didn't ask any questions. He had a copy of the presentation notes in front of him, and he was reading through them with the focused attention of someone who was confirming rather than discovering, which was its own kind of answer. At 10:47, Hartley said, "I think we have what we need." She looked at her panel. "Dr. Okonkwo?" "Confirmed," he said, without looking up from his notebook. "Dr. Park?" The fourth panelist, quiet until now. "Confirmed." "Dr. Cho?" Cho looked up. He looked at Logan. "Confirmed," he said, and there was something in the way he said it that wasn't just procedural. It was the acknowledgement of one person who takes this seriously to another. "Dr. Reyes?" She'd come in as a competitor. She was confirming the win of someone who'd beaten her. She did it with the clean directness of someone who understood that science doesn't have a lesser version of true. "Confirmed," she said. Hartley looked at Logan. "The solution is verified," she said. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes." The room was not the main hall. There were 7 people in it and no cameras and no live stream. The applause was 4 people's hands and lasted about 10 seconds. It was enough. Logan looked at the whiteboard for a moment. Then he said quietly, "Thank you." He didn't say anything else. He sat down. Madison, in the chair near the back of the room, found that she had to look at the ceiling for a second to get her expression under control, which was not something she'd expected, and which she noted with the private candor of someone taking inventory of their own reactions. The official announcement came at noon, not a press release. Madison had learned something in the last 48 hours about what managed distance costs, and she'd adjusted. It was a brief, live statement from the Meridian Grand's main stage. The same room, different energy. Logan stood beside her. He was still in the dark jeans and the plain jacket. She was in charcoal again. They were not performing anything, which was probably why the live stream, when Priya checked it before they went on, was at 163,000. Madison spoke first. She confirmed the verification, named the solution, credited Logan Hayes as the sole author of the underlying theoretical framework. She said the $50 million prize would be transferred as soon as the standard administrative process completed, which was typically 2 business days. Then she said, "I also want to formally acknowledge what this summit uncovered beyond the challenge itself. Research belonging to Logan Hayes was removed from a public archive in 2019 without his knowledge. That removal enabled others to profit from his work without attribution. That is going to be addressed through proper legal channels. I want the field, and the people in it, to know that we take that seriously." She paused. "I made a mistake at the beginning of this summit that I've been thinking about for 3 days. I called someone forward as a joke. I was performing for a room instead of paying attention to what was actually in front of me. Logan Hayes was gracious enough not to hold that against me." She looked sideways at him. "I'm still working on earning that." She stepped back. Logan stepped to the microphone. He looked out at the room, at the cameras, at the seats, most of them full, the journalists along the walls, the researchers who'd stayed for the closing day, the Meridian Grand staff at the edges, and Marcus, he noticed, standing near the service corridor door in his uniform, which he appreciated more than he could have explained. "The problem had an error in it," Logan said, "a foundational assumption that made the solution look impossible. Once you find the error, the solution isn't easy, but it's real. It exists." He paused. "I think that's true of a lot of things that look impossible." He wasn't a speech maker. He'd never been comfortable with the formal register of these moments, the cadence people expect from podiums. He was aware that he wasn't giving them the version they might have wanted, the triumphant reclaiming narrative, the clean arc of the underdog landing clean. "I want to say one thing," he said. "I left research 8 years ago because my daughter needed me. I want to be clear that wasn't a sacrifice. I chose it completely, and I'd choose it the same way again." He paused. "But someone else made a choice for me at the same time, took something without asking, at a moment when I couldn't protect it. Those are 2 different things, and I think it matters to say that they're different." He looked at the room. "You can let go of something and still deserve to have been asked." Silence. "That's all I have," he said, and stepped back. Afterward, the day had the quality of a wave that's already broken. Still moving, still carrying things, but the main force of it spent. There were interviews, which Priya managed with a firmness that Logan found genuinely useful. There were conversations with researchers he'd never met who wanted to discuss the implementation steps, which he was less uncomfortable with because those were about the work rather than about him. There was a brief, awkward, genuine exchange with Gregory Paulson that happened in a hallway outside the speaker lounge and lasted about 4 minutes. Paulson had clearly spent the night deciding what to say and had landed on directness. "I'm initiating a correction with the journal," he said. "Attribution to your 2019 paper with a full explanation of the derivation. My legal team will be in touch with yours about the commercial licensing question." He paused. "It won't be enough, I know that." "It's a start," Logan said, because it was. "I was a coward," Paulson said. "Not as self-flagellation, as a factual statement." "You made a choice," Logan said. "It wasn't a good one, but you're fixing it." Paulson looked at him with the expression of someone who has been offered more grace than they feel they've earned and isn't sure what to do with it. "Your extended work on the third recursive layer," Logan said again, because he'd meant it the first time. "That genuinely advanced the thing. I want you to know I'm not saying that to make you feel better." "I know," Paulson said. "You're not that kind of person." They shook hands. Not warmly, honestly. Misa. At 3:15, Madison found him in the same service corridor where she'd first stopped him 2 days ago. He wasn't working. He was just standing there, looking at the exit door, not quite moving toward it, with the expression of someone who has run a very long race and has arrived at the finish line, but the legs haven't gotten the message yet. "The Nexus situation," she said, coming up beside him. "Hale and I talked this morning. Priya told me. He's going to pull back, publicly. It's damage control on his end, not conscience, and I won't pretend otherwise." She leaned against the wall. "The legal chain on the archive withdrawal, that's yours. That's your decision. What you do with it. Claire will give you a full brief. You can take it to whatever counsel you want. We'll support whatever you decide." "What do you think I should do?" he said. She looked at him. "I think you should use it. Not for destruction, for record. There should be a documented, official record of what was done and who did it. Something that's harder to walk away from than a news cycle." She paused. "But that's my instinct, and it's your life." He nodded slowly. "What are you going to do with all of it?" she said. "The prize. The—" She gestured loosely at the general situation. "Everything." He thought about it. "I'm going to set up a trust for Nora's education," he said. "That's the first thing, and I want to buy a car with windows that seal properly." He said it completely seriously. She laughed, which she hadn't expected to do. "That's your plan for $50 million. I'm getting to the rest of it." "Okay." "I want to go back to research," he said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud to anyone, and he could hear the weight of it in his own voice. "Not in the way I did before. I'm not 26 anymore, and I don't want to live in a lab. But the work I was doing, the adaptive constraint theory, there's more there. There are extensions I was thinking about even yesterday, standing on that stage. It's not finished." "No," she said. "It's not." They were quiet for a moment. "I want to offer you something," she said. "And I want to be very clear that you can say no, and it won't change anything about what Arcturus will do for the legal situation or anything else. This isn't contingent." "Okay," he said. "Chief Innovation Partner, equity stake, decision-making authority on research direction, salary that matches your actual value, which is considerably more than you've been making." She paused. "You set your own hours. Specifically, you are never required to be anywhere at 3 p.m. on a weekday because of school pickup, or any other time your daughter needs you. That's not a perk. That's a structural condition of the role." Logan looked at her. She held his gaze. "It's real," she said. "I'm not performing right now. I know how much of this week has looked like I was performing. This isn't." He looked at the exit door. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out. Looked at it. A text from Nora. "Dad, the science fair is today after school. You said you'd come. Did you forget?" He looked at the text for a moment. Then he looked up at Madison, who had seen his face shift and was waiting. "What time is it?" he said. 3:20, she said. "The science fair starts at 4, he said. "Go," she said. "I haven't answered." "I know." He looked at her. She was standing in the service corridor of the building where 3 days ago she'd handed him a microphone as a joke, and the distance between that moment and this one was something he couldn't quite measure. Not in time, not in any unit he had. "I'll think about it," he said. "That's fair?" He started toward the exit. He stopped. "Madison?" She looked at him. "You said something on the broadcast last night," he said, "about judging someone by what they were wearing." "I meant it," she said. "I know you did." He paused. "The thing is, the uniform wasn't the problem. The uniform is just cloth. The problem was assuming that the cloth told you something true about what was underneath it." He paused. "A lot of people make that assumption. You at least noticed you were doing it." She absorbed that. "Some people never notice," he said. He pushed through the exit door. Shove. The East Side Garfield Community Center gymnasium smelled like floor wax, and the particular combination of poster board and marker that was the universal smell of school science fairs. 40-some projects on folding tables, handmade display boards in every color, students standing beside their work with the variable expressions of children who have been told to look confident and are doing their best. Logan arrived at 4:07, which meant he was 7 minutes late, which he noted with the specific guilt of a person who had promised to be somewhere on time. He spotted Nora's table from across the gym. Her display board was the one with the 2 columns of potted plants, the control group and the music group, with a hand-drawn graph and a heading that read, in Nora's careful handwriting, "Do Plants Grow Faster with Music? A Scientific Investigation by Nora Claire Hayes, age 8. Nora was standing beside the table talking to a classmate and did not immediately see him come in. He watched her for a moment from across the gym, the way she gestured at her graph, with the proprietary energy of someone presenting their own work, the way she pushed her hair back before explaining something, the particular tilt of her head when she was listening to a response. 8 years old. His eyes and Emma's mouth and that way of talking that was entirely her own. He crossed the gym. She looked up when he was about 5 tables away. "Dad." "Hi. You're late." 7 minutes, he said. "There was traffic." She gave him the evaluating look. "Was it the weird day again?" "The weird day is mostly over," he said. "Tell me about the plants." Her expression shifted, the evaluating look becoming the presentation look, the pride coming up under it. "So the control group got nothing," she said, pointing, "and the music group got 45 minutes of piano music every day for 2 weeks. And look at the measurements." She showed him the data sheet, which was extremely thorough, with dates and numbers and units labeled correctly. The music plants grew an average of 1.3 centimeters more. "That's a real result," he said. "I know," she said. "Mrs. Kim said it might be because of the vibrations, but I want to test if it's the specific type of music or just any sound. For the next experiment." She looked up at him. "Is that a good hypothesis?" "That's an excellent hypothesis," he said. "You need a control condition for sound that isn't music to separate the variables." She nodded seriously, pulling out a notebook and writing something. "White noise," she said. "That could be the sound control." "Exactly right," he said. She kept writing. He stood beside her table and looked at her work. The careful data, the honest graph, the plants in their 2 neat rows. He thought about equations on a whiteboard. He thought about what it means to do work that is rigorous and honest and follows the evidence, even when the evidence leads somewhere unexpected. He thought about what kind of thing you pass to someone, not by saying it, but by doing it in front of them long enough that it becomes theirs too. "Dad," Nora said, not looking up from her notebook. "Yeah." "The weird day. Was it good?" He looked at her. She was 8 years old with a notebook and a science fair project and a hypothesis about white noise and plants. And she was asking him a real question the way she always asked real questions, directly, without decoration, because she actually wanted to know. "Yeah," he said. "It was good." She nodded, satisfied, and kept writing. He called Madison that evening, after dinner, after Nora was in bed with the science fair ribbon. 3rd place, which she had decided was actually better than 1st because more people got to win, propped up on her nightstand. "The offer," he said. "I've been thinking about the specific structure of it." "Okay," she said. "The equity stake. I don't want shares in Arcturus AI as it currently exists. Okay, she said carefully. I want to build something separate, he said. A research division with independent governance, not a subsidiary, something with its own charter. The work I want to do is long range. It doesn't fit inside a commercial AI company's quarterly timeline, and we'd both be frustrated if we pretended otherwise. He paused. But there could be a formal partnership. Arcturus funds the first 3 years of operational costs. In exchange, commercial applications derived from the research are jointly developed with Arcturus as preferred partner. Not exclusive, I'm not signing exclusivity, but preferred with structured terms. Silence on the line. You've been thinking about this for a while, she said. I thought about it during the science fair, he said. There was some downtime between judging rounds. Logan. It also needs to be based in Eastside Garfield, he said. Or close. I'm not moving, Nora. I wasn't going to ask you to, she said. There's a commercial building 12 blocks from the community center. It's been sitting vacant for 2 years. It has the square footage. He paused. You already looked. I looked this afternoon, she said. While you were at the science fair, I wasn't going to mention it unless you called. He was quiet for a moment. What do you want out of this? He said. Not the business answer, the real one. She was quiet on her end too for a second. I want to build something that I'm proud of, she said. I've built things that were successful. I've built things that were valuable. I haven't built very many things that I was genuinely proud of. She paused. I think working with you would be one of those things, and I think that's worth more than most of what I've been doing. Even if it's slower, he said. Even if it's slower, she said. I'm not going to be the kind of partner who's available at 10 p.m. for investor calls, he said. I'll survive. And I'm going to push back when I disagree with research direction. I'd expect nothing less. And Nora's school play is in December, and I will not be in any meeting that afternoon regardless of what's happening. December is noted, Madison said. There was something in her voice that wasn't quite amusement and wasn't quite something else. The particular warmth of someone who has been in the presence of a thing that is real and is letting themselves feel that. Okay, he said. Okay? I'll draft something, he said, for the structure. Send it to your legal team. I'll have Claire ready, she said. He was about to hang up. Then, Madison. Yeah. 3 days ago, you handed me a microphone as a joke. I know, she said. I'm going to keep knowing that for a while. I'm not saying it to make you feel bad, he said. I'm saying it because it's actually kind of funny, from a distance. A pause. Then she laughed. A real one, caught off guard, the kind that doesn't have performance in it. Good night, he said. Good night, Logan. The legal proceedings that followed were neither fast nor clean, because legal proceedings never are. Victor Hale and Nexus Group spent 3 months in various degrees of public retreat before settling with Logan's legal team on terms that included a full written acknowledgement of the archive interference, a financial settlement that Logan donated in its entirety to a research access fund for independent scholars, and a formal joint statement that entered the public record. Hale resigned from Nexus Group's board in January. The company restructured its AI subsidiary. Paulson published the attribution correction in October. The journal appended a full editor's note. Several downstream papers had to update their citation chains, which caused a minor upheaval in a small corner of the academic world that mostly resolved itself within 6 months. Paulson continued his research. He sent Logan a copy of his next paper before it was submitted for review. Logan sent back 17 pages of notes. Paulson used most of them. The Hayes Research Institute opened in March of the following year, 12 blocks from Eastside Garfield Community Center, in the building that had been sitting vacant since the restaurant supply company moved out. It had good bones and terrible lighting, which Logan fixed in stages as the operational budget allowed. The first research team was 4 people: Logan, a postdoctoral researcher he'd found through a network Dr. Aisha Morrow had helped rebuild, and 2 research associates who were recent graduates who had watched the broadcast on a laptop in their shared apartment and emailed the contact address the next morning. Within 18 months, the team was 11. Within 2 years, 3 separate papers had come out of the institute carrying Logan's name and the names of people who had not had a venue for their work before. Madison came to the opening. She stood in the main research room, which smelled like new drywall and takeout coffee, and looked at Logan's whiteboard, already covered in notation, some of it hers because she'd started working through a problem with him the week before and had taken it further than she'd expected to. "This is strange," she said. "The building?" "All of it." She looked at the equations. 3 months ago, I was running a summit. Now I'm a business partner with a research institute in Eastside Garfield. She paused. "I'm not complaining. I'm just noting that life is structurally weird." "It is," he agreed. "How's the work going?" "The adaptive constraint extensions are about 18 months from a publishable framework," he said. "The team is good. The postdoc, Rivera, she caught a gap in my methodology last week that would have cost us 4 months if she hadn't." "Good catch. Very good catch." He said it with the specific satisfaction of someone who is more pleased to be wrong in a useful way than to be right. That's what the Institute is supposed to be. People who catch each other's gaps. Madison looked at the whiteboard for another moment. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and you can tell me if it's too personal." "Ask." "When you go home tonight," she said, "and you're sitting in the kitchen and the day is over, is it different than before all of this?" He thought about it. "Some things are different," he said. "The car window seals properly now." He said it seriously, which made her smile. "The work is different. Having a place to put it, people to do it with, that's different in a way that I'm still getting used to." He paused. "But the kitchen is the same, Nora is the same, the pasta is the same." He looked at the whiteboard. "I think I worried for a while that all of this would shift something, change what the last 8 years were, make them look smaller or like something I was just doing until the real thing came back." "Did it?" "No," he said simply. "I think what happened at the summit made it clearer, actually. The last 8 years were the real thing. This is also the real thing. They're not competing." Madison was quiet. Emma would have laughed at the janitor part, he said. It was the first time he'd said her name in front of Madison. He said it easily, without making it a moment, because it wasn't a wound right now. It was just true. She had a very specific sense of humor. She would have thought the whole thing was the funniest story she'd ever heard. He paused. She would have liked Nora's reaction. Nora thinks it's mostly interesting because of the science fair hypothesis. She keeps saying the experiment with white noise is going to be more important. She's probably right, Madison said. She usually is, he said. Duh. Nora's white noise experiment ran the following spring. She presented the results at the regional science fair with a control group and a music group and a third group exposed to steady broadband sound, and her conclusion, carefully worded with full acknowledgement of the limitations of an 8-year-old sample size, was that the plants appeared to respond to vibration frequency rather than musical structure specifically, which she noted meant that the original experiment's results needed to be replicated with more variables controlled. She placed first in her age group. Logan was there when they announced it. He was standing in the back of the gymnasium, the way he stood in most rooms, not taking up more space than he needed, watching, present. When Nora held up the ribbon, she found him in the crowd immediately, the way she always found him, with the radar that children have for the specific presence of the person who shows up. He raised one hand. She raised the ribbon. That was the whole exchange. It was enough. There is something that doesn't get discussed enough about the people who get buried. Not dramatically, not with visible injustice, but quietly, at moments when they can't fight back. The ones who step away from something, not because they want to, but because something more immediate demands all of what they have. The ones who come back, if they come back at all, to find that the space they'd occupied has been filled, the work they'd done has been absorbed, the record has been quietly rewritten. What happened to Logan Hayes was not unique. That's the honest thing to say. It was not a story that happens once and gets corrected and then the world moves on with lessons learned. It happens with a regularity that the people inside the industry know about and mostly don't discuss, because the structure that allows it is also the structure that runs everything. And naming the problem means naming something large and uncomfortable and close. What was different about Logan's story was not the injustice. It was the accident of a microphone. A CEO made a joke. A room laughed. A man walked to a stage. And 67 seconds later, something that had been invisible for 8 years became impossible to look away from. That's not a moral. It's not a lesson with clean edges. It doesn't tell you that the system works, because the system didn't work. The system failed repeatedly and for years, and nobody noticed until a woman with a performance instinct handed a janitor a microphone in front of cameras. The accident is not evidence that the accident will happen again. But Logan Hayes stood on a stage in a work uniform and wrote an equation on a whiteboard, and what he wrote was true, and the truth of it held up under every form of pressure that was brought against it. It held up in the verification room with 5 specialists asking hard questions. It held up in the legal proceedings. It held up in the papers that followed and the corrections and the journal appendices. What is true stays true, even when it's been in a drawer for 8 years, even when someone removed it from the archive, even when the person who discovered it was mopping a floor. The work was real. The loss was real. The recovery was real and imperfect and incomplete in the way that recoveries of real losses always are. Gregory Paulson will carry what he did. Victor Hale lost more than he intended to and less than he deserved. The structure that made it possible remains, somewhat altered, mostly unchanged, waiting for the next person who steps away from something at the wrong moment. Logan Hayes goes to work in the morning, not to the Meridian Grand. He left that job the day after the verification meeting, and Marcus covered his remaining shifts, and they shook hands in the parking lot, and Logan told him he was good at the job and meant it. He goes to the Institute, 12 blocks from the community center, where the lighting is better now, and the whiteboard is almost never clean, and Rivera caught another gap last month that cost them 2 weeks and was absolutely worth catching. He picks up Nora at 3. He makes pasta on Tuesdays. He reads to her, which she still wants, even though she's old enough not to need it. And he has stopped questioning that and started accepting it as a fact of his particular life that he is glad for. He is not what the world would have made of him at 26 if things had run differently. He is also not what he was at 32, pushing a cart through the east wing of the Meridian Grand with a window that didn't seal, and a daughter who texted him about control groups. He is something that those two things made together, rough at the seams, specific, his. Madison Reed visits the Institute on the first Tuesday of every month. She is not always easy to work with. She is impatient and sometimes too certain, and she has a tendency to push timelines that Logan has to push back against with the calm stubbornness of someone who learned patience the expensive way. She is also, when the work is going somewhere real, one of the most engaged people he has ever had in a room. She asks questions that are genuinely hard. She remembers details from 3 months ago and returns to them when the new data makes them relevant. She is learning, slowly, a different way of measuring things. Not slower. She has not become patient, exactly, but she has become more interested in the difference between what something looks like and what it is. That's not a transformation. It's an adjustment. It's the kind of change that's invisible most days and then visible all at once when you look at the total. On the first Tuesday of April, she came into the Institute and found Logan and Rivera at the whiteboard working through something that had clearly been going on for a while. Both of them with markers, the board covered in 4 colors of notation, coffee cups at various stages of cold on the table behind them. She stood in the doorway and watched for a moment without them noticing. This was, she thought, this specific thing. The two of them at a whiteboard, arguing in the gentle way of people who trust each other's intelligence. The equations climbing up into the corner where the board met the wall. This was what the $50 million was for. Not the prize, not the ceremony. This was what it was for. She came in and set her bag down and said, "You've got a sign error in the 3rd line." Logan looked. Rivera looked. Rivera said, "She's right." Logan erased the 3rd line, and the work continued.